Have you ever wondered what really happens when an ordinary man must carry the emotional weight of portraying Jesus Christ before 300 million viewers around the world? What if you were told that Jonathan Roumie, the actor behind the most realistic Jesus in modern television, had experiences during the Chosen filming that defy any logical explanation? What would you say if you knew there exists an unreleased recording where he appears crying uncontrollably after a specific scene from Season 5, a scene that not even the producers can fully explain? 3 months ago, sources close to the Chosen production revealed something that Dallas Jenkins's team has been trying to keep in absolute secrecy. During the filming of Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem for Season 5, something extraordinary happened to Jonathan Roumie that changed not only the course of the season, but forever transformed the actor's life. The episode was recorded by the set's security cameras, but the material was never officially released. Until now. If you seek to understand the divine mysteries happening around us, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share in the comments your own spiritual experiences. Your participation strengthens our community of truth seekers. The 5th season of The Chosen, titled The Last Supper, represents the most challenging moment of the series since its premiere. Focused entirely on Holy Week, this season follows Jesus' final days before crucifixion, exploring the emotional intensity of the Last Supper, Judas's betrayal, and the events that culminated in history's most important sacrifice. But what few know is that during these filmings, Jonathan Roumie underwent a spiritual transformation so profound that some crew members began questioning where interpretation ends and something much more mysterious begins. According to accounts obtained unofficially, Roumie's preparation for this season was different from everything he had done previously. The actor, known for his extreme dedication to the role, intensified his routine of prayers and fasts to such an extent that he lost 15 kilograms in just 2 months. Crew members reported that he was frequently found kneeling in prayer during filming breaks, murmuring words in Aramaic, a language he supposedly had never formally studied. The moment that changed everything happened during the filming of the scene where Jesus enters Jerusalem riding a donkey, being acclaimed by the crowd shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David." It was a Tuesday in March at 3 in the afternoon when something inexplicable occurred. The cameras were rolling normally. Hundreds of extras were playing the Jewish people in celebration. But when Jonathan Roumie looked at the crowd, something in his eyes changed completely. It was no longer the actor playing Jesus, it was as if a different presence had taken his place. When spiritual forces manifest in our physical world, we need wisdom to interpret them correctly. If you value this type of revealing content and want to help us continue bringing these deep investigations, consider acquiring our ebook, The Secret of Jesus' Apparitions, for a symbolic price. This exclusive material offers keys to decipher divine signs and understand how Christ manifests in our times. Your contribution allows us to maintain this independent research work. The link to acquire the material is available in the pinned comment. The first person to notice that something was happening was the director of photography, Sarah Johnson, who has been working with religious productions for 8 years. In an interview not widely disclosed, she told that Jonathan stopped saying his rehearsed lines and began improvising words that weren't in the script. But they weren't random words. They were phrases in ancient Hebrew, spoken with an authority that made the crowd of extras fall into complete silence. Some began crying spontaneously. Others fell to their knees. What made the event even more mysterious was the fact that for exactly 7 minutes, all the set's cameras began recording a strange light around Jonathan Roumie's figure. The technicians initially thought it was an equipment problem, but when they analyzed the later recordings, they discovered that only the cameras focusing directly on the actor presented this luminous phenomenon. The others, filming the extras and scenery, worked perfectly. Dallas Jenkins, the creator and director of The Chosen, was present during the entire scene and remained silent for almost an hour after what happened. When he finally spoke to the crew, his words were enigmatic. Some things transcend fiction. What we just witnessed wasn't in our plans, but maybe it was exactly what this season needed. Jenkins ordered that filming be suspended for the rest of the day, and that everyone present sign a confidentiality agreement about the specific events of that session. Jonathan Roumie, for his part, seemed completely exhausted after the episode. Witnesses report that he went immediately to his trailer and remained there for more than 3 hours. When he emerged, his eyes were red and swollen, as if he had been crying intensely. When questioned about what had happened, his response was surprising. "I can't explain what I felt out there. For a few moments I felt as if I was no longer myself, as if someone much greater was operating through me. It's terrifying, and at the same time the closest I've ever felt to God." The story of how Jonathan Roumie became the most authentic Jesus in modern television began long before the chosen cameras started rolling. Born in New York in 1974, son of an Egyptian father and Irish Catholic mother, Roumie grew up breathing faith in his family. But his spiritual journey would be marked by moments of profound darkness before finding the light that would lead him to the role of his life. What few know is that at 44 years old, Roumie was on the brink of emotional and financial bankruptcy when he received a call that would change not only his career, but his relationship with God irreversibly. In May 2018, Jonathan Roumie woke up with a negative bank balance, only $20 in his wallet and bills to pay. 3 weeks without work had exhausted his financial reserves and his hope. But it was in that moment of total desperation that something extraordinary happened. Kneeling before the crucifix in his modest Chicago apartment, Roumie said a prayer that he himself describes as the most honest of his life. He asked God to assume complete control of his career, promising never again to try to manage his professional life alone. Hours after that prayer, 4 unexpected checks arrived by mail, exactly enough to cover his immediate needs. A few months after that financial miracle, Dallas Jenkins contacted Roumie for a project that initially seemed modest, an independent series about Jesus' life, funded by crowdfunding. Jenkins had already worked with Roumie on 2 short films years before, The 2 Thieves and The Shepherd, where the actor had portrayed Jesus in smaller productions for an evangelical church. But this time, Jenkins had a much bigger vision: to create the first multi-season series about Christ's life, exploring not only his divinity, but his profound humanity. Roumie's preparation to play Jesus in The Chosen went far beyond what any actor would normally do. He not only studied the scriptures intensively, but adopted spiritual practices that transformed his daily routine. Regular fasts, hours of contemplative prayer, studies of Aramaic and ancient Hebrew, plus consultations with Catholic and Orthodox theologians, became part of his preparation. But most impressive was his radical decision to donate practically all his income from the series, keeping only the minimum necessary for his basic needs. During the first seasons, Roumie developed a unique ritual before each important scene. He would isolate himself for at least 30 minutes, pray the complete rosary, and specifically ask for God to use his interpretation as an instrument of evangelization. Crew members reported that during those preparation moments, an almost tangible peace emanated from the actor's trailer. Some technicians, initially skeptical about faith, began seeking Roumie for spiritual conversations during filming breaks. The 5th season of The Chosen presented unique challenges that tested the emotional and spiritual limits of everyone involved. Centered entirely on Holy Week, this season explores Jesus' last 7 days on earth, from his triumphal entry into Jerusalem to the resurrection. For Roumie, this meant portraying not only the triumphant Jesus acclaimed by crowds, but also the anguished Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, betrayed by Judas, and finally crucified. The emotional weight of this journey began to deeply affect the actor months before filming began. In a recently revealed interview, Roumie admitted that preparation for the 5th season took him to emotional places where he had never been. Playing Jesus' final days means diving into the most intense human experience in history. It's not just about memorizing lines or understanding character motivations. It's about trying to understand how the Son of God processed betrayal, extreme physical pain, and momentary separation from the Father. That broke me in ways I didn't expect, confessed the actor during a spiritual therapy session with his spiritual director, Father Michael Thompson. The fifth season recordings began in Goshen, Utah, where grandiose sets were built to recreate first-century Jerusalem. 600 extras per day participated in the first scenes, creating an atmosphere of authenticity that impressed even the most experienced technicians. But it was during the move to Midlothian, Texas, where the Garden of Gethsemane was recreated in the smallest details, that the most inexplicable events began to occur. The first strange manifestation happened during the construction of the Jerusalem temple set. Workers reported that for 3 consecutive days, a white dove appeared at the same time, always at 3 in the afternoon, and remained motionless on the scenographic altar for exactly 7 minutes. The phenomenon was recorded by the set's security cameras, but when the production team tried to approach the bird, it disappeared instantly, as if it had never been there. Jonathan Roumie, always attentive to spiritual signs, interpreted the dove's appearance as divine confirmation that the project had heavenly blessings. He began including the dove in his daily prayers, referring to it as our special visitor. Other crew members, initially skeptical, began eagerly awaiting the bird's daily appearance, which became a kind of informal blessing ritual for the filming day. The atmosphere on the chosen set was always different from other television productions. Since the first season, Dallas Jenkins established that each filming day would begin with a collective prayer, and Jonathan Roumie frequently led moments of spiritual reflection during breaks. But during the 5th season, this atmosphere intensified notably. Spontaneous conversions began happening among technical crew members, some of whom had never previously shown interest in religious matters. The phenomenon of conversions and spiritual transformations on the chosen set wasn't limited to crew members. Extras, many of whom were local actors hired only for a few scenes, reported profound experiences during filming. Maria Gonzalez, one of the extras who played a woman in the crowd during the triumphal entry, told that, "When I saw Jonathan Roumie riding that donkey, for a moment I completely forgot it was filming. I felt as if I was really seeing Jesus entering Jerusalem. I began crying without being able to stop, and I wasn't the only one." The moment that would forever change. The Chosen's 5th season happened on a March morning at 5:47, when Jonathan Roumie was alone on the Garden of Gethsemane, set preparing for the most challenging scene of his career. What should have been a normal routine of prayer and meditation transformed into something that not even the series' theological consultants could completely explain. The security cameras recorded everything, but the material remains under absolute production secrecy, being shared only with ecclesiastical authorities in confidential analysis. That dawn, Roumie had arrived at the set 3 hours before the scheduled time, carrying only his personal Bible and his Lebanese grandmother's rosary. Wearing Jesus' tunic, he knelt in the exact place where the garden's agony would be filmed, that agonizing moment where Christ sweated blood while praying, "Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me." What happened next was recorded in detail by the night security guard, James Rodriguez, in his official report that only recently came to light through sources close to the production. For 43 minutes, Jonathan Roumie remained in silent prayer, motionless as a statue. Rodriguez reported that at exactly 6:30, the actor began trembling violently, as if being taken by an external force. He began murmuring words I didn't recognize. It seemed Aramaic or Hebrew, Rodriguez wrote in his report. Then something happened that changed my life. Tears of blood began sliding from Jonathan's eyes. They weren't red tears or blood-stained tears. They were tears literally composed of pure blood. The phenomenon lasted exactly 7 minutes, during which Rodriguez remained paralyzed, alternating between the impulse to call medical help and the inexplicable certainty that he was witnessing something sacred. "I felt I shouldn't interrupt him," he related later. "It was as if a greater presence was there with him, and I was just a witness to something much greater than any filming." When the blood tears ceased, Jonathan Roumie opened his eyes and looked directly at Rodriguez with an expression that the guard described as the face of someone who had just seen God himself. The first person to arrive at the set that morning was Dallas Jenkins, who found Jonathan Roumie sitting in silence, with dried traces of blood on his face. Initially alarmed, Jenkins called the medical team, but the examinations revealed no wound or condition that could explain the bleeding. Dr. Patricia Williams, production physician for 8 years, documented the case as inexplicable phenomenon from a medical point of view, noting that the patient presented normal vital signs and no physical injury that would justify the presence of blood. When asked about what he had experienced, Jonathan Roumie remained silent for almost 2 hours. His first statement, made only to Dallas Jenkins and recorded in confidential recording, was disturbing. "Dallas, I don't know if I can continue doing this. For some moments, I felt as if I was really in the Garden of Gethsemane 2,000 years ago. I saw things that shouldn't be possible to see. I felt pains that weren't mine. And the most terrifying, for some minutes, I no longer knew who I was. Jonathan had disappeared completely." The decision to continue filming that day generated intense debates among the production. Some crew members, clearly shaken by Rodriguez's account and Roumie's visibly transformed condition, suggested postponing the most intense scenes. But the actor himself, after hours of reflection and prayer with the production chaplain, Father Michael Harrison, decided that the episode had been divine preparation for what was to come. "If God gave me a glimpse of his son's real suffering," said Roumie, "then it's my responsibility to use that experience to make this interpretation as authentic as possible." The following filming sequence, focused on Judas's betrayal and Jesus's arrest, was marked by more inexplicable manifestations. During the betrayal kiss scene, Luke Dimion, who plays Judas, reported a deeply disturbing experience. "When I approached Jonathan for the kiss, for a moment I saw something different in his eyes. It was no longer the actor I had known for 5 years. It was as if I was really betraying someone sacred. The guilt I felt was so intense that I vomited immediately after the camera stopped recording." The set's security cameras recorded another phenomenon during this scene. Several nocturnal birds, which are normally not seen during the day, appeared simultaneously in the sky above the set exactly at the moment of betrayal. Ornithologists consulted later confirmed that the bird's behavior was totally anomalous, as different species flew together in formation, something that doesn't occur in nature. The flight lasted precisely the time of the betrayal scene, dispersing immediately after the director's cut. The emotional impact of these experiences began affecting not only Jonathan Roumie, but the entire set dynamics. Group therapy sessions were organized to help the crew process what they were experiencing. Father Michael Harrison, production chaplain, reported that he had never seen a filming crew so spiritually impacted by their work. People who had never shown religious interest sought spiritual counseling daily. It was as if we were all participating in an intensive spiritual retreat disguised as television production. The events that followed that transformative night in the Garden of Gethsemane created waves of change that spread far beyond the filming set, reaching each crew member's personal lives in ways no one could have predicted. Jonathan Roumie, still processing his supernatural experience, began showing signs of a spiritual transformation so profound that those who had known him for years could barely recognize the man emerging from the ashes of his former identity. The actor who had once struggled with addictions and depression was becoming something completely different, and not even he fully understood what was happening to him. 2 weeks after the blood tears incident, Jonathan Roumie made a decision that shocked not only his management team, but the entire entertainment industry. In a private meeting with his agents and lawyers, he announced he was donating his entire participation in The Chosen's fifth season profits to Christian charitable organizations around the world. "Money means nothing to me anymore," he said, according to confidential reports from the meeting. "After what I experienced, I understood that my function here is much greater than any financial compensation could represent." Roumie's decision wasn't impulsive. For 3 consecutive nights after the Gethsemane experience, he reported having vivid dreams where he saw crowds of people around the world watching The Chosen and being transformed by the message. In the dreams, I could see specific faces of people crying in front of their televisions, people who had never entered a church, people who had lost hope. Roumie told his spiritual director, "And I heard a voice that clearly said, 'This isn't about you, it's through you.' I woke up knowing my life had changed forever." Jonathan Roumie's transformation began being noticed by the other cast actors in subtle but deeply impacting ways. Shahar Isaac, who plays Simon Peter, observed that Jonathan began arriving at the set at 4 in the morning every day, not to study his lines, but to pray for each person working in the production. He knew everyone's names, from executives to cleaning assistants, and prayed specifically for their personal needs. How he knew these needs, no one could explain. Elizabeth Tabish, who plays Mary Magdalene in the series, documented her own transformation through personal diaries that were only recently partially revealed. "Working alongside Jonathan after his Gethsemane experience was like acting with someone who had really walked with Jesus," she wrote. "During scenes where my character interacts with Jesus, I frequently forgot we were performing. There were moments where I felt as if I was really receiving unconditional love, real forgiveness, genuine healing. I began questioning whether I was experiencing fiction or reality." The most dramatic personal transformation happened with David Kim, assistant director who had struggled with addictions for more than a decade. Kim, who had tried rehabilitation several times without success, reported an experience during filming of the scene where Jesus cleanses the temple. Jonathan was interpreting Jesus' indignation against the merchants, and when he looked in my direction during that scene, I felt as if he was looking directly at my addictions, at all the filth I carried inside me, Kim recounted. "That night, I poured all my substances down the toilet and never felt like using them again. I've been clean for 8 months, and for the first time I feel this is permanent." The most subtle but perhaps most significant change was establishing an atmosphere of radical honesty on set. People began confessing sins, fears, and personal struggles to each other spontaneously. It was as if Jesus' presence, through Jonathan's interpretation, created a safe environment where masks could be removed, observed Lisa Chen, executive producer. People who had worked together for years were finally being honest with each other for the first time. Jonathan Roumie, aware of the impact his transformation was having on others, began feeling heavily responsible for the entire production's spiritual well-being. He instituted weekly voluntary spiritual counseling sessions where any crew member could seek guidance or simply talk about faith matters. "Jonathan never preached or pressured anyone," explained Amanda Foster, series editor. "He was simply available, like a safe harbor amid the personal storms we all face." The Chosen's 5th season finished filming in December, but its effects continue reverberating in the lives of those involved for months. Jonathan Roumie, now completely transformed by the experience, began receiving invitations from churches around the world to speak about his journey. His response was characteristically humble. "I'm not a preacher or a saint. I'm just an actor who had the privilege of portraying Jesus and was forever changed by that experience. If God can use someone broken like me, He can use anyone." The moment to decide which side you're on in this spiritual battle has arrived. Our ebook, The Secret of Jesus' Apparitions, reveals how Christ manifests in the last times and what your role is in this spiritual war. Last copies available in the pinned comment. This may be your last opportunity. When The Chosen's 5th season finally premiered worldwide, the impact was far beyond any entertainment industry expectations. The numbers alone were already impressive. More than 300 million views in the first 6 months, translations into 87 languages, simultaneous exhibitions in 150 countries. But statistics couldn't capture the true phenomenon, happening in homes, churches, and hearts of millions of people around the world. What Jonathan Roumie had experienced in those prayer dawns was multiplying exponentially through screens, creating a wave of global spiritual transformation that not even the most experienced sociologists could adequately measure. The first indications that something extraordinary was happening came through reports from pastors and religious leaders of different Christian denominations. Father Antonio Silva, from a Catholic parish in São Paulo, documented a 400% increase in mass attendance after 5th season episodes began being shown in Brazil. People who hadn't entered a church for decades began appearing, saying they wanted to know the Jesus they saw on screen, Silva reported. But it wasn't casual curiosity. There was genuine spiritual hunger, a thirst to personally find that presence they had felt through the series. Pastor James Mitchell, from a Baptist church in Atlanta, reported similar experiences, but with an additional element that left him deeply perplexed. Over the last 6 months, we've had more than 200 adult baptisms, most people attributing their conversion to watching The Chosen, Mitchell explained. But what intrigues me is that many of these new converts describe mystical experiences during episodes. Visions, sensations of divine presence, even physical healings. As a pastor for 30 years, I never witnessed a revival initiated by a television series. The phenomenon wasn't limited to traditional Christian circles. Reports began arriving from prisons, hospitals, rehabilitation centers, and even non-Christian communities where the series was causing unexpected conversions. Dr. Rachel Goldman, a Jewish psychiatrist working with terminal patients in New York, was surprised when several of her patients began mentioning experiences of deep peace after watching The Chosen. As a mental health professional and person of Jewish faith, I was initially skeptical, admitted Dr. Goldman, but I can't ignore clinical results. Patients who were in deep depression due to terminal diagnosis report serene acceptance after watching the series. Something is happening that goes beyond common entertainment. The 5th season's international impact revealed fascinating cultural nuances about how different societies processed Christ's message presented through Jonathan Roumie's transformed interpretation. In South Korea, where Christianity represents a significant minority, the series caused an unexpected social phenomenon. Dr. Kim Lee-soo, sociologist from Seoul University, studied the series' cultural impact and discovered surprising patterns. In a highly technological and secular society like ours, we expected resistance to religious content. Instead, we found young Koreans organizing Bible study groups after watching The Chosen. Some are learning English specifically to better understand Christian teachings. In Europe, where Christianity had experienced significant decline in recent decades, The Chosen's 5th season created waves of renewed interest in faith. Father François Dubois, from a cathedral in Paris that was considering closure due to low attendance, reported a phenomenon he described as resurrection of a dead church. For 50 years, I saw our congregation age and diminish. Young French people showed no interest in the Catholic Church, explained Father Dubois. Then people of all ages began arriving, saying they wanted to know more about the Jesus they saw in The Chosen. Now, we have 3 packed masses every Sunday. The most intriguing aspect of global reports was the consistency of mystical experiences described by viewers, regardless of their cultural origins or religious denominations. Dr. Maria Rodriguez, anthropologist from the University of Barcelona who specializes in studying contemporary religious experiences, compiled more than 1,000 accounts from different continents. What we found is extraordinary, Rodriguez published in her academic report. People from completely different backgrounds who watched episodes in diverse languages report phenomenologically identical experiences: sensations of divine presence, visions of light, deep emotional healings, spontaneous conversions. The uniformity of accounts suggests we're dealing with something that transcends cultural differences. Jonathan Roumie, aware of his interpretation's global impact, began feeling the weight of a responsibility that went far beyond his career as an actor. Invitations began arriving from universities, seminaries, religious conferences, and even the Vatican to speak about his experience. His initial response was one of profound humility, mixed with genuine fear. "How can I explain something I myself barely understand?" he confided to Dallas Jenkins. "People around the world are being transformed by something that happened through me, but I don't know if it was really me or if I was just an instrument. What if I can't repeat that authenticity in future seasons? What if I disappoint all these people who found hope?" The spiritual pressure Roumie felt intensified when reports of physical healings began arriving from different parts of the world. Teresa Martinez from Guadalajara, Mexico, wrote a detailed letter about the complete remission of her breast cancer after watching the Passion of Christ episodes. "Doctors can't explain it," Martinez wrote. "During chemotherapy, I religiously watched every fifth season episode. During the crucifixion scene, I felt as if something was being removed from my body. My next exam showed the tumor had completely disappeared." The deepest dimension of the fifth season's global impact emerged through documented social changes in entire communities. Reverend Michael Johnson, who works with gangs in Chicago, reported a dramatic reduction in youth violence in neighborhoods where he organized community screenings of the series. Young people who were in literal war with each other began seeking peaceful mediation after watching episodes about forgiveness and reconciliation, Johnson explained. "We have police documentation showing 60% reduction in violent crimes in areas where we implemented the Chosen program." As months passed, it became clear that The Chosen's fifth season had catalyzed something much greater than television success. Sociologists began using terms like digital revival and transmedia spiritual reform to describe the phenomenon. Dr. Robert Williams, specialist in religious movements from Harvard Divinity School, published an academic article arguing that we are witnessing the first genuinely global spiritual awakening movement of the digital era, initiated by a cinematographic interpretation of Jesus Christ that transcends denominational, cultural, and linguistic barriers. Jonathan Roumie, processing the weight of all this, reached a conclusion that changed his perspective on his role as actor and as Christian. "I understood that my function wasn't just to interpret Jesus for an audience," he declared in his first public statement after the global phenomenon. "My function was to allow Jesus to manifest through me for a generation that desperately needed to find him. And if that means I'll never again be just Jonathan Roumie, but will always carry this sacred responsibility, then I accept it with gratitude and reverent fear." The legacy of The Chosen's fifth season transcended entertainment to become a catalyst for global spiritual transformation. Verses like John 14:12 gained new relevance. "Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do, and greater works than these will he do." Through Jonathan Roumie's transformed interpretation, millions of people around the world experienced a personal encounter with Jesus Christ that changed not only their individual lives but began transforming entire communities. The actor who had cried tears of blood on a set had become an instrument through which divine love reached the darkest corners of the world, proving that when we allow God to operate through our brokenness, He can use our vulnerability to touch multitudes. If these revelations awakened something in your spirit, show it by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing in the comments how God has manifested in your own life. Your testimony can touch the heart of someone who needs this message. Join our community of truth seekers and continue with us on this journey of spiritual discoveries that can change your life forever.